Welcome to the Korea Pro Podcast, your weekly guide to understanding the most pressing and complicated developments shaping South Korea. We're your hosts, Jungmin Kim,
John Lei,
and Junha Park of Korea Pro.
go beyond headlines as we explain not just what happened, but also what really matters and why it matters.
If you monitor South Korea for work or just trying to keep up, you're in the right place.
This is the Korea Pro Podcast.
Hello, listeners, and welcome back to another episode of the Korea Pro Podcast. It is now Thursday. It's a bit before 3 p.m. And, oh boy.
Well, we were thinking about maybe talking about Iran as well. We will, but we are not going to bore you with all the back and forth. So let's start with something else to clear our mind for just a minute. So let's talk about chips. Samsung Electronics on Tuesday said it expects first quarter operating profit to jump sharply. And the LG Electronics earnings, or was that also just expectation? It also
No,
came
those
out.
are actual numbers.
Actual numbers. Quarterly revenue, it was better than expected, apparently.
A lot better.
A lot better. And the Samsung also issued estimated revenue as well,
Mhm.
right? And so we have to keep an eye on the actual number from Samsung, but LG said the profitability improved despite the raw material and logistic costs rising for very apparent reasons recently. And all of this happens, I should mention it happens while the Middle East stuff is going, it's still very, very confusing. But all of this, it's still expected earnings from Samsung. But is this an important news in the chips industry, or is this something of a trend that we have seen in past few quarters?
Yes and no.
Yes and no.
It is part of the trend, but the trend bucked and went up even higher. And that's precisely because of what's been going on in the Middle East. With the Iranians targeting AI data centers in the UAE, in Bahrain, and Qatar and other places, the demand for chips is going to increase. And so because of that increased demand for chips, yes, LG, Samsung, and the SK and all the other usual suspects, they saw increased demands, which saw increased revenues. But that's only the short-term gains. The real problem is logistics.
Yeah.
Because the Middle Eastern countries have been so hit in the infrastructure, they're not likely going to be able to export the same amount of raw materials and energy and fuel to all these Asian countries, including South Korea, in the foreseeable future. And with the increase in the price of inputs and the increase in the price of logistics, long-term trend, while the demand for chips will likely be there, it's not certain as to whether or not South Korean companies will be able to continue to exploit this demand.
Well, the South Korean government has been responding to some of the pressures, looking for alternative sources of oil. But many of the materials you noted in the executive briefing, it includes helium.
Which is irreplaceable.
Right. So it's almost impossible to find replacements for that, right?
Uh-huh.
Okay, so it's a bit of good news, but not really.
Short-term good news, long-term, who knows?
Who knows? Speaking of who knows, the government sought to handle the who knows part of this conflict through the supplementary budget. And when this episode is published, it will be Friday, and likely the plenary session would have started or about to start. And it's very likely that the supplementary budget proposal will be passed. Can either of you, run the listeners through what the supplementary budget was and what it's trying to achieve?
Right, so it is 26 trillion won. It's a supplementary budget that was introduced as a wartime budget by the president just last week. It's essentially targeting businesses that will be hit very hard by the Iran conflict, also the general population, handing out relief funds, damages, high oil prices caused by high oil prices during this current conflict season.
Conflict season.
There's quite a lot of seasons lately. But also, we also saw this debate transitioning into how the semiconductor businesses are going to be supplemented throughout the conflict within the interpellatory sessions that's been happening for the past 2 weeks now.
Right.
Comes down to a trade-off in core policy between the two parties. So the ruling Democratic Party and the opposition People Power Party basically saying that the ruling party wants to achieve competitiveness and the People Power Party is flagging risk. So essentially,
It's per usual, right?
yeah, essentially it's just the DP saying that they need faster, more aggressive investment, i.e. vis-a-vis the supplementary budget in the Yongin Semiconductor cluster. They're arguing that new technologies could expand overall demand, even if prices fall. So South Korea needs to move quickly to stay ahead. However, the opposition, People Power Party, they're warning about overconcentration on the Yongin cluster. They're saying that it's clustered
Weren't
around.
they the ones that were like supporting it before?
Yeah,
Was their
well,
idea?
It
tomato,
was
Yeah,
tomato.
it
it was their
was.
idea.
They seem to be diverging on that stance. And they are saying that production is clustered around the Seoul metropolitan area or the Gyeonggi area. So they're arguing that the industry is vulnerable to these disruptions. So conflict, power outages, shortages, what have you. And they're pushing for more regional diversification.
That's interesting because Yongin Mayor is also PPP. DP is also pushing for extra, add-on to the supplementary budget for childcare, vulnerable groups especially, and the special business owners and the energy conversion. So that's a lot of, additional budget that they want. I'm not sure if the addition will be added at the end on Friday, but we'll see. Were there anything else interesting during the interpellation sessions?
Well, it's just once again, the prime minister fielding questions on the economic side, which was primarily focused on semiconductor, but the foreign policy side, which was interesting, is the unification minister, who has always been very vocal about his current job and what it entails, has been suggesting that the Lee Jae-myung administration, in keeping quiet and in keeping the peace with North Korea, has not been adding to the Iran conflict.
Right, and we won't go into it too much on Korea Pro podcast, but it's been a very busy week on the inter-Korean side of things. And if you want to know more, check out nknews.org. Let's move to speaking of which, let's actually talk about the GOP issue a little bit. It was a controversy, but then if you dig deep, it's actually something that has been planned for a while, but maybe the timing wasn't so great. But what's the issue basically? What's the proposal?
Well, if we look at what just preceded An Gyubek's, the defense minister's remarks, North Korea basically shut out South Korea, saying that it's still very much a hostile state in their eyes, despite commending the president for
Being frank and bold.
being
Yeah.
frank and bold, expressing regret over a drone incursion instigated by ROK civilians. So, what he was saying in a press conference for the Defense Ministry press corps was that South Korea will cut the number of troops stationed at the general outpost that's along the southern side of the DMZ border.
So, put it simply, there are two lines of security near the border, and the GOP is a further away one, right?
Yes, yeah.
And the GPs are the ones that are close,
Right at the border.
right at the
yeah.
border.
And the GOPs are usually the ones that respond to incursions. They usually fire warning shots or give warning messages and keep their surveillance on top ground. But he was saying that his ministry will look to cut these troops stationed at General Outpost from 20,000 personnel to 6,000 personnel. That's about 75% of personnel by 2040. And replacing those soldiers with advanced high state-of-the-art artificial intelligence systems.
I mean, overall, the goal of replacing some of the manual work into AI or MUMT, the manned-unmanned system, it always has been a goal since like Lee Myung-bak administration at least. But was 75% always the number? Did it go up?
It was originally around about 10,000, including both GP and GOP. But I think the minister was focusing directly on general outpost numbers,
Not GP.
not just GP.
I see.
So he was focusing just on that specific base count, which I think the South Korea operates about 20 of those bases
I see.
along the southern border of the DMZ. But this, as you've said, has been in place since the Lee Myung-bak Innovation Project. They're trying to look towards responding to these population shortages and these military manpower shortages that have been very much projected to be under 400,000, 2040, 2050, which is very much low numbers compared to North Korea's military manpower count. So that's why South Korea's defense ministry is looking to achieve this goal by 2040.
Right. I do feel like they could have just started doing it a bit low key, like quietly, because like right now, all the headlines already are about incursions and especially like South Korean incursions into the north as well, which our GOP and GP could not really detect because the TODs are not facing that side. And so maybe the timing would have been better. But anyways, it's something that South Korean military has been talking about for a while. Are there any responses from the retired generals or military so far?
Well, there have been opposition from the People Power Party. They've criticized the minister for, opening the door to North Korea per se, as I quote. But as we mentioned before, this has been in the works for more than decades now. So it's not something that's new. It's just something that we can consider as a result of timing and bad timing on the part of the defense minister for answering during this press conference.
Right, but also he was asked about it, right? Also, just quickly mentioning, we're still chasing the story in the newsroom, but you were covering that, right? The U.S. South Korea intel issue. This is also a little bit on North Korea, but then it involves U.S. assets related issues. The timing wasn't really that great with the GOP because it was the exact moment when PPP head of defense committee Sung Il-jong, Representative Sung Il-jong, outsourced information that South Korean side could not detect a North Korean projectile or projectiles that disintegrated quite quickly because there are differences between the early warning system between South Korea and the US. And apparently US one did catch it reportedly. And so it required additional time to analyze, right? That's why it wasn't reported in media initially.
They're still analyzing it.
Right. But the OPCON issue was brought up by the PPP side. Can you walk us through what the argument is?
Right. So essentially, as you mentioned, South Korean military intelligence could not pick up the real time data of a North Korean projectile that was fired on Tuesday morning. The US informed them allegedly beforehand, saying that a missile launch was happening. And that's when
Their
South
one is
Korea.
satellite based, right?
Right. So South Korea's system is usually for long range and medium range. For short range, you would need satellite material.
Right. And that's why there's a missile information sharing system, right?
Exactly. What the PPP's Song Il-jong's argument was that if South Korea moves forward with this hasty positioning of regaining OPCON Washington, they would miss out on these intelligence systems from the United States.
Right. I think it's a fair point to the level of, there are risks in rushing. I think that's a totally fair point. But exactly this, like the missile information sharing, would it, go away if there's OPCON transfer? I don't think that's the case.
No, the defense ministry did say to us just a couple hours ago that even if OPCON transfer does happen within the near future, South Korea and the United States will maintain that posture through that close mutual information sharing, through U.S. satellite information and South Korean owned information sharing.
Right, but still need to be careful a little bit here from the South Korean side because Trump did mention that the U.S. will come for only critical and limited support, and missile warning and monitoring it will probably count as conventional side of the security as well.
Mm-hmm.
And lastly, something that John has been focusing on in Iran. What's new?
Well, Operation Epic Failure is more like kind of winding down a little bit. The Americans are now trying their best to extricate themselves from the war without losing face entirely. The Iranians are trying to maintain as much control as possible. They're going to meet in Islamabad on Saturday to hash things out, but they both have very polar, different demands, and so we're not quite sure how this negotiation will take place. But the important thing is because it's the Career Pro podcast, how does this impact South Korea, right? If you look at the foreign ministry's public statements, there are two different kinds of statements. The one is a public facing one, where it's a very deliberate statement where the South Korean government says that they welcome the ceasefire and they hope to see a return to basically pre war conditions, open navigation, that kind of thing. But, good luck getting that. And so if you look at the other kind of statement where it's more internal facing, the ministry officials are much more cautious. They're not really sure if this ceasefire is achievable, attainable, realistic. And so they are still operating under the premise that constraints and this new reality that we're in is still very much in place.
Which is sort of like war is over but not over, and the Hormuz Strait is open but not open, and the ceasefire is, I don't even know what that means anymore, sort of reality.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so it's the Schrodinger's cat, right? And that's the situation that we're in. But what's really important for South Korea is the kinds of constraints they're going to face, not just from Iran, but from the United States. Donald Trump has November midterm elections to look forward to. His poll numbers are tanking. The Republican poll numbers are tanking. And if the Democrats retake the House of Representatives and the Senate, then Donald Trump's agenda is dead in the water, assuming that he doesn't, round up ICE and decides to do January 6th on steroids all over again. But anyway, because he's trying to maintain as much control over the US government, he needs to be able to tell the average American voter that he was able to achieve peace through strength, right? And so he realized that Iran has a lot more resistance, that you can't just push them around with just the missiles alone. But who can they push around? Allies. And his experience has told him that that is true. Throughout his entire first year in office, he has insulted allies. He has imposed tariffs. He has made fresh demand after demand after demand every time they've made a concession. And so that's what he's going to turn his attention to. He's going to make.
He already did.
Not yet concrete ones, but he will make a lot more. So on the one hand, Iran is going to say, hey, welcome to our new toll booth. And on the other hand, the Americans are going to say, hey, you didn't help us in our war, so here are more tariffs that we're going to impose on you. So, yay.
But South Koreans are still talking with the Iranian side as well, right?
The talks are ongoing, but apparently not nearly as productive as what the Japanese are doing. I'm not quite sure what exactly kind of leverage that Tokyo has. But when it comes to South Korea, all these oil tankers and oil companies, as we've discussed last week, they've got deep connections with American companies. And that's what's really getting the Iranians shaking their chains. South Korea is way too embedded in American supply chains.
And to know more what kind of punishment can come South Korea's way soon from Trump, read John's latest analysis. Week ahead. This is actually not week ahead, but tomorrow. Today, Thursday, by the time we're recording, at 7 p.m., there would be a new oil price cap, the third round. The finance minister will be announcing it, and it will be effective starting midnight. And the gasoline prices, it's over 2,000 Korean won per liter. And so the third price cap will likely be around 2,100 Korean won.
And the South Korean military will be continuing their Hwarang civil military exercises throughout the peninsula, or the southern side of the peninsula. I believe they will finish their drills in Daegu tomorrow, but they'll continue on with the drills all throughout November.
And this time around, it's like industrial bases, industrial
Right,
defenses
against the
mostly,
drone
right?
attacks. But also we'll see the Freedom Flag exercise between the US and South Korea's air forces continue from tomorrow for the next 2 weeks until the 24th of April. It's usually a biannual exercise that happens usually at this time of the year and also October or November. And it's just a regular drill against North Korean threats.
And again, there would be a plenary session on Friday. And by the time we're recording next week, we will see what kind of supplementary budget actually passed.
And all of this information will be sent to email inboxes by Monday, 2 p.m. via the Weekly newsletter. So if you'd like to know more, please subscribe. Bye-bye.
And that's a wrap. Thanks for tuning in.
If you want to know more, sign up for our daily executive briefings. We'll brief you on all you need to know from the past 24 hours and why it matters, delivered to your inbox every morning.
If you want to stay ahead of the curve, sign up for Korea Pro to get a full package of insights, from daily expert analysis to profiles, month in review, week ahead, and more.
And until next time, I'm Jungmin Kim.
I'm Junha Park.
And I'm John Lee, and we'll see you next time on the Korea Pro Podcast.